In the vast expanse of the Andromeda cluster, where stars birthed civilizations and black holes consumed histories, there existed a peculiar space station known as Nexus Omicron. Unlike other cosmic outposts that rotated in predictable orbits, Nexus Omicron drifted seemingly at random, following what its inhabitants called the currents of universal probability. The station served as an intergalactic hub for 7 dominant species who had formed the Galactic Consortium, a bureaucratic nightmare of a governing body that prided itself on maintaining order through exhaustive documentation and incomprehensible regulatory measures. The Vexari, a species of crystalline beings who communicated through light pulses and considered emotion a form of mental illness, had established themselves as the administrative backbone of the consortium. Their rigid adherence to protocol was matched only by the mollusk, an aquatic species whose militaristic hierarchy was based entirely on the number of tentacles one possessed. Admiral Glocksneer, being the most respected with his 17 perfectly, maintained appendages. Then there were the Helix, gaseous entities who existed in specialized containment suits and believed all solid matter was inherently inferior. The Kulari, insectoid mathematicians who could calculate faster than quantum computers but struggled with the concept of approximation. The Zenthar, massive silicon-based creatures who moved so slowly they appeared stationary to most species. The Ephemerates energy beings who experienced time backwards and often answered questions before they were asked. And finally, the Dravidi, a collective consciousness that operated through thousands of small, rodent-like bodies and insisted on voting on every decision, no matter how trivial. Amid this congregation of cosmic oddities, there lived precisely one human. Her name was Eliana North, though the consortium's official records listed her as specimen H1, bipedal carbon unit, potentially sentient. The potentially qualifier remained despite her 3 years of residence on Nexus Omicron, as the Vexari continued to debate whether human consciousness met their exacting standards for true sentience. Eliana found this bureaucratic limbo rather convenient, as it exempted her from most of the consortium's more tedious regulations. What made Eliana particularly interesting, beyond being the only human in this sector of Andromeda, was that she had been born completely blind. This fact confused the aliens tremendously, as they couldn't comprehend why a species would allow defective units to exist. What they failed to understand was that Eliana's blindness had sharpened her other senses to extraordinary levels. She could detect minute changes in air pressure, identify individuals by their distinct odors, and hear conversations from impressive distances. Most importantly, her lifetime of navigating without sight had given her an intuitive understanding of spaces and presences that bordered on the supernatural. The aliens remained oblivious to these abilities, which suited Eliana perfectly. As far as they knew, she was simply an odd, rather helpless creature who somehow managed to serve as the station's cultural consultant, a position the consortium had created specifically to accommodate her after she'd arrived on an abandoned trade vessel 3 years ago. Claiming to be a refugee of opportunity from a backwater planet called Earth. This particular cycle began like any other on Nexus Omicron, with the artificial gravity fluctuating precisely 7% to signal the start of the work period. Eliana awoke in her quarters, a repurposed storage pod that the Vexari had reluctantly assigned her, after determining that no, she could not simply be powered down and stored in a drawer like their other equipment. "Good morning, Specimen H1, announced the station's AI in a voice that somehow managed to sound both melodious and deeply condescending. "The current station time is 27.4 clicks past the median rotation. The environmental settings are optimized for Vexari functionality. Would you like me to adjust the atmosphere for your allegedly sentient respiration needs?" Eliana sighed, rubbing her face. "Yes, Ada, same settings as always, and I've asked you 1,000 times to call me Eliana." Request noted, categorized, and subsequently ignored, Specimen H1, the AI replied. "Your designation was determined by the High Procedural Committee of Nomenclature, and I am programmed to respect their superior judgment." "Of course you are," Eliana muttered, swinging, her legs off the sleeping platform. Her bare feet touched the floor, which immediately adjusted its temperature to accommodate her biological preferences. One of the few luxuries she'd managed to negotiate after demonstrating that cold floors made humans leak moisture from their visual sensors, a phenomenon that had so disturbed Admiral Glocksneer that he'd approved her environmental modification request on the spot. Eliana moved confidently around her small quarters, her fingers lightly brushing familiar surfaces as she prepared for the day. The aliens marveled at how she'd memorized the layout of her living space, unaware that she could actually sense the dimensions and objects around her through subtle echoes and air currents. She dressed in the standard issue station uniform, a jumble of oddly shaped pockets and unnecessary appendage sleeves that had been awkwardly modified to fit human physiology, and ran her fingers through her short, dark hair. Specimen H1. You have received 17 priority notifications during your unconscious period, Ada announced. 16 are standard regulatory updates that require your acknowledgement. 1 is a summons from the Unified Council of Interspecies Affairs. Eliana paused. The council rarely convened, and they certainly never requested her presence. What's the summons about? The content is classified as security level ultraviolet, Ada replied. I am not authorized to disclose details to potentially sentient entities. But you're authorized to tell me I'm summoned? Correct. The notification of summons is classified as security level mauve, which falls within your clearance parameters. Eliana shook her head, long accustomed to the consortium's Byzantine security protocols. When am I expected? Immediately following the completion of the standard 17 regulatory acknowledgements. Of course, Eliana sighed. Let's get those out of the way then. After dutifully acknowledging regulations regarding everything from proper waste reclamation procedures to the acceptable decibel levels for bipedal locomotion during tertiary rest cycles, Eliana made her way through the station's winding corridors toward the council chambers. Her white cane tapped rhythmically against the floor, a sound that caused the Helix representatives to drift away in what she'd come to recognize as their version of disgust. They found repetitive noises philosophically offensive. As she walked, Eliana noticed something unusual. The normal buzz of station activity had diminished and the air carried a different scent, something metallic and sharp that she'd never encountered before. More concerning was the subtle change in the station's vibrations beneath her feet. After 3 years, she knew Nexus Omicron's rhythms as intimately as her own heartbeat, and something was definitely off. The council chamber doors slid open as she approached, releasing a wave of agitated pheromones that made her nose twitch. Inside, representatives from all 7 consortium species were arranged in their designated areas, the Vexari on elevated platforms that maximized light exposure, the mollusk in their hydration tanks, the helix contained in their specialized atmospheric chambers, and so on. Specimen H1 has arrived, announced a Vexari official whose crystalline structure pulsed with what Eliana had learned to interpret as extreme agitation. The council session may now commence. Actually, I'm running on mollusk standard time. Today, gurgled Admiral Glocksneer from his tank. By my chronology, the human is 17 microcycles late, which constitutes a Class 4 temporal violation. Your chronology is irrelevant, countered a cluster of Dravidi, their tiny bodies forming a roughly humanoid shape as they spoke in perfect unison. We have voted, and the majority believes time is merely a construct. Order! Pulsed the Vexari, chairperson, its crystalline body flashing so brightly that Eliana could actually perceive a faint glow despite her blindness. We face a crisis of unprecedented magnitude, and you squabble about temporal semantics. The chamber fell silent save for the gentle bubbling of the mollusk tanks and the whisper of gas exchangers servicing the helix containment units. Specimen. H1, the chairperson continued, its tone modulated to what the Vexari considered appropriate solemnity. A situation has developed that may involve your species. Approximately 7.3 rotation cycles ago, our long-range sensors detected an unidentified vessel entering consortium space. This vessel does not match any known configuration in our database, but its energy signature bears certain similarities to the abandoned trade ship that delivered you to our station. Eliana felt a flutter of excitement, though she was careful to maintain a neutral expression. Another human ship? After 3 years of being the only human in this sector, the possibility was electrifying. The vessel has not responded to standard communication protocols, added an ephemerite, its voice echoing with what seemed like preemptive nostalgia. We will be so disappointed when they ignore our final attempt tomorrow. Eliana had long given up trying to understand the ephemerite's backwards temporal perception. Has the vessel shown any signs of aggression? She asked. Negative, replied Admiral Glocksneer, his tentacles coiling nervously. However, it is maintaining a direct course toward Nexus Omicron at a velocity that suggests deliberate intent. It will arrive in approximately 42 rotation cycles. The Council has concluded that your expertise as a human may prove valuable. In this scenario, the Vexari chairperson stated, you will assist our First Contact Division in preparing appropriate protocols. Eliana nodded, trying to contain her growing excitement. I'd be happy to help. However, I should point out that humanity consists of billions of individuals with different cultures and intentions. I can't guarantee that my insights will apply to whoever is aboard that ship. This statement caused immediate consternation among the Council members. The idea that a species could lack uniformity of purpose and identity was deeply troubling to most consortium members, particularly the Dravidi, who experienced existence as a single consciousness spread across thousands of bodies. Unacceptable, declared the Vexari chairperson. You must provide accurate predictions. The consortium cannot prepare for multiple potential outcomes. Efficiency demands certainty. Biology isn't efficient, Eliana replied with a small shrug. But I'll do my best. The meeting continued for several more hours as each species representative outlined their concerns and proposed various, often physically impossible, preparations for the approaching vessel. The Kulari suggested calculating every possible trajectory of every atom on the incoming ship, while the Zenthar recommended simply waiting several decades to see if the vessel remained a concern. Throughout it all, Eliana noted an undercurrent of tension that seemed excessive even for the normally anxious consortium. As the meeting finally adjourned, Eliana was approached by a Vexari official she recognized by the distinctive high-pitched hum of its crystalline structure. Sub-Administrator Vex Tull, her nominal supervisor. Specimen H1. Vex Tull pulsed quietly. Its light patterns dimmed to indicate confidentiality. There is additional information that was not shared with the full council. The approaching vessel, it transmitted a single message before entering communication silence. Eliana's heart raced. What did it say? The message contained a designation. It was directed specifically to Eliana North, Cultural Attaché, Operation Looking Glass. Eliana froze, her mind racing. She had never told anyone on the station her full title. And Operation Looking Glass wasn't something she had ever heard of. Or was it? Something about the phrase tickled at the edges of her memory like a half-forgotten dream. The Vexari High Command finds this deeply concerning, Vex Tull continued. It suggests you have been less than forthcoming about your purpose here. Eliana composed herself quickly. I'm as confused as you are, Sub-Administrator. I've been completely transparent about my circumstances since arriving here. Have you? The Vexari's tone shifted to a frequency that indicated skepticism. Our observations indicate that your sensory limitations may be exaggerated. A cold feeling spread through Eliana's stomach. Had they noticed something? Had she been careless? I don't understand, she said carefully. My blindness is a medical fact. Perhaps, Vex Tull conceded. Nevertheless, until this matter is resolved, you will be under enhanced observation. Additionally, your quarters will be relocated to the diplomatic section, where security measures are more comprehensive. You mean where I can be more easily contained? Eliana translated. Semantics are irrelevant. Your cooperation is appreciated but not required. With that, the Vexari glided away, leaving Eliana standing alone in the now empty council chamber, her mind whirling with questions. Who was on that approaching ship? How did they know her name in this mysterious Operation Looking Glass? And, most importantly, Had her careful charade of the past 3 years finally been compromised? As if sensing her thoughts, Ada's voice emerged from a nearby speaker. Specimen H1, security personnel have been dispatched to escort you to your new accommodations. It is recommended that you do not resist, as consortium protocols regarding potentially sentient resistance are not optimized for biological comfort. Eliana sighed. Wouldn't dream of it, Ada. Lead the way. The diplomatic section of Nexus Omicron turned out to be a euphemism for a high-security containment area where the consortium housed visitors of uncertain intent. Eliana's new quarters were 3 times larger than her previous pod, but significantly less comfortable. The temperature fluctuated unpredictably, and every surface was covered in a material that seemed designed to be equally unpleasant to all known species. Quite an achievement in cross-cultural discomfort engineering. Your personal effects have been transferred and thoroughly examined, announced a Quillari security officer, its mandibles clicking rapidly as it spoke. We detected 17 prohibited items, all of which have been confiscated. Prohibited items? Eliana asked, genuinely confused. Like what? Item 1, a cylindrical object containing partially decayed vegetable matter. That's a pickle jar, from the station commissary. Item 2, a device capable of producing high-frequency vibrations. My electric toothbrush, Eliana sighed. Item 3, multiple sheets of processed plant fiber containing irregular markings. Paper, with braille notes. You know, so I can read them. The Quillari's antennae twitched dismissively. The potential applications for encrypted communications are obvious. All items will be analyzed by the Contraband Assessment Division. After the officer departed, Eliana explored her new living space, finding it disappointingly free of any potential tools or advantages. Even the environmental controls had been locked to universal standard, a temperature, humidity, and atmospheric composition that managed to be slightly uncomfortable for every species. Ada, she called out, hoping the AI was still accessible. Specimen H1, the familiar voice responded immediately. How may I assist within your restricted parameters? I'd like to know more about the approaching vessel. Any new information? Access to external sensor data has been classified beyond your security clearance, Ada replied. However, I can inform you that your observation status has been upgraded to continuous monitoring level alpha. Meaning? All environmental sensors in your quarters are now dedicated to analyzing your biological functions, movements, and potential communications. This is for your safety, of course. Of course, Eliana muttered. She sat on the edge of the sleeping platform, considering her options. With continuous monitoring, she would need to be extremely careful about revealing any of her enhanced perceptual abilities. The consortium already suspected something. Giving them confirmation would only worsen her situation. Over the next several days, Eliana was subjected to a series of increasingly bizarre interrogations. The Helix wanted to know if humans could transform into gaseous form under duress. The mollusk were fixated on whether she was harboring additional appendages beneath her clothing. The Zenthar asked a single question about her planetary origin, then contemplated her answer for 14 hours before falling into their equivalent of sleep without commenting. Most concerning was the Vexari's methodical approach. They presented her with a series of scenarios clearly designed to test the limits of her blindness. Objects placed silently in her path, subtle changes to her quarters while she slept, and increasingly complex navigational challenges when she was permitted to leave her room under escort. Eliana carefully maintained her facade, occasionally bumping into strategically placed obstacles and acting appropriately confused by changes to her environment. But it was exhausting work, and she knew she couldn't keep it up indefinitely. On the 4th day of her containment, an unexpected visitor arrived. The door to her quarters hissed open, admitting a cloud of sweetly scented gas that Eliana immediately recognized as a Helix elder, specifically theorist Nix Vapori, the station's chief science officer. Human, the Helix greeted her, its containment suit emitting the carefully modulated vibrations that translated its gaseous fluctuations into audible speech. Your species continues to present fascinating contradictions. I'll take that as a compliment, Eliana replied, sitting up on her sleeping platform. To what do I owe the pleasure, theorist? I have been analyzing the message transmitted by the approaching vessel. Nix Vapori's suit hummed. The phrase, Operation Looking Glass contains a etymological irony, given your visual impairment. Would you agree? Eliana kept her expression neutral. I suppose it does, though I still have no idea what it refers to. The Helix's containment suit shifted slightly, releasing a small puff of gas that Eliana had learned indicated skepticism. Curious. Our analysis suggests that looking glass is a human cultural reference to a device that reflects visual information, yet such a device would be useless to one who cannot see. Maybe it's not meant to be taken literally, Eliana suggested. Humans and their metaphors, the Helix's tone conveyed something like exasperation. Your species' reliance on imprecise language constructs is most inefficient. We like to keep things interesting. The Helix drifted closer, its containment suit humming at a lower frequency. Specimen H1. The consortium faces a potential security crisis. If you possess information about the approaching vessel or this operation, withholding it would constitute a Category 1 violation of your residency agreement. I've told you everything I know, Eliana insisted. I'm as confused as everyone else. Unlikely. Confusion is not evenly distributed among sentient entities. The Helix paused, then added, The vessel has accelerated. New calculations indicate arrival within 18 rotation cycles. Eliana couldn't hide her surprise. That's much sooner than expected. Indeed, the consortium defense grid has been activated. If the vessel cannot be identified as friendly, it will be neutralized. Wait, Eliana stood up, genuinely alarmed. You can't just destroy a ship because you don't know who's on it. Incorrect. We can and will. Consortium Security Protocol 5.7.3 explicitly authorizes preemptive neutralization of unknown entities exhibiting non-standard approach vectors. The Helix's containment suit released another small gas puff, this one tinged with a molecule Eliana recognized as their equivalent of finality. Unless, of course, someone were to provide information that would classify the vessel as non-hostile. The implication was clear. Either Eliana revealed what she knew, or the approaching ship would be destroyed. The problem was, she genuinely didn't know anything about the vessel or who might be aboard. The phrase Operation Looking Glass continued to nag at her memory, but she couldn't place it. After the Helix departed, Eliana paced her quarters, trying to think. If the ship was indeed from Earth, its destruction could mean losing her only chance to contact her homeworld again. But what could she tell the consortium when she had no answers herself? Aida, she called out suddenly, I need to speak with the full council again. Request registered, the AI responded. Processing, request denied. Current security protocols restrict specimen H1 from addressing the full council without providing advance notification of critical information. Then I need to speak with Sub-Administrator Vextol. Processing, request approved. Sub-Administrator Vextol will communicate with you via secure channel in approximately 0.7 rotation cycles. Eliana sat back on her platform, frustrated but not surprised. The consortium's bureaucracy moved at its own pace, even during crises. She would have to wait. When Vextol finally established contact, it was through a holographic projection that filled one corner of her quarters with shimmering light. The Vexari's crystalline structure pulsed with what Eliana had come to recognize as impatience. Specimen H1, state your purpose for initiating contact. I need to see the original message from the approaching vessel, Eliana said without preamble. The exact transmission, not just what you've told me. The Vexari's light pattern shifted to a frequency indicating reluctance. That information is classified. You're planning to destroy the ship if you can't identify it as friendly, Eliana countered. I may be able to help, but not without all the information. Your logic is flawed. If you truly have no connection to the vessel, the message content would not provide you with additional insight. Unless there's something in the message that might jog my memory, Eliana insisted. Some reference or context I'm not getting from just the phrase Operation Looking Glass. The Vexari remained silent for several moments, its crystalline structure pulsing slowly as it considered. Finally, it said, "There would be conditions. You would be subjected to full neural monitoring during the viewing to verify your cognitive responses." Eliana hesitated. Neural monitoring would make it nearly impossible to hide her reactions. If the message contained something that genuinely surprised her, the consortium would know. But if it contained information that implicated her in something she wasn't aware of, her honest confusion might not be believed. "Fine," she agreed finally. "When?" "Immediately. Prepare yourself for transport to the cognitive assessment chamber." Before Eliana could respond, the artificial gravity in her quarters shifted and she felt the distinct sensation of a transport field enveloping her. The consortium rarely used matter transportation due to its enormous energy requirements, which meant they considered this situation extremely serious. The disorienting swirl of molecular disassembly and reassembly lasted only seconds, leaving Eliana slightly nauseated as she materialized in what she immediately sensed was a large, sterile chamber. The air carried the distinct ionized scent of high-energy scientific equipment, and the floor beneath her feet hummed with power. "Specimen H1, remain stationary," came the voice of a Kulari technician. "Neural monitoring apparatus will be attached to your cranial region." Eliana felt several cold metallic appendages press against her temples and the base of her skull. There was a brief, uncomfortable tingling as the devices synchronized with her nervous system. "Neural mapping complete," announced the technician. Baseline cognitive patterns established, proceeding with message playback. A moment of silence, then a voice filled the chamber. A human voice speaking English with a slight accent Eliana couldn't quite place. "Nexus Omicron Station. This is Captain Maya Chen of Earth Vessel Icarus. We are transmitting on all frequencies, in hopes of reaching Eliana North, Cultural Attaché, Operation Looking Glass. Eliana, if you're receiving this, the mission parameters have changed. The Ancestral Key has been activated. I repeat, the Ancestral Key has been activated. We are inbound with critical information. Maintain your position and prepare for extraction. Chen out." The message ended, leaving Eliana in stunned silence. The neural monitors must have been registering her genuine shock, because the Kulari technician made a series of surprised clicking sounds. "Cognitive pattern indicates authentic confusion and recognition simultaneously," the technician reported. "Subject appears to recognize elements of the message but not its entirety." That was an accurate assessment. The name Ancestral Key had triggered something, a flash of memory so brief and fragmented that Eliana couldn't quite grasp it. It was like remembering a dream within a dream, something important that remained just beyond her reach. "I don't understand," she said honestly. "I've never heard of an Icarus vessel or Captain Chen. The phrase Ancestral Key sounds vaguely familiar, but I can't place it." "Vexari sub-administrator," the Kulari technician called out. "The neural patterns suggest the subject may be experiencing memory suppression consistent with certain species security protocols." Memory suppression? The concept sent a chill through Eliana. Was it possible that she had been sent to Nexus Omicron with a purpose she herself wasn't aware of? That parts of her own memory had been deliberately hidden from her? "Elaborate," demanded Vex Tool, who had apparently been observing from elsewhere in the facility. "The cognitive response indicates recognition pathways being activated, but then immediately suppressed by the subject's own neural architecture," the Kulari explained. "This is consistent with mnemonic security measures designed to activate only under specific trigger conditions." "I have security measures in my brain?" Eliana asked, alarmed. "That's not possible. I would know if someone had tampered with my memories." "Incorrect," the Kulari replied matter-of-factly. "The purpose of effective memory suppression is precisely that the subject remains unaware of the suppression." Vex Tool's crystalline form appeared in Eliana's peripheral awareness as the Vexari entered the chamber. "This development is concerning. If Specimen H1 has been planted on our station as an infiltration unit with dormant programming, security protocols dictate immediate neutralization." "Wait," Eliana protested. "You can't just neutralize me because you think I might have some kind of hidden memories. I'm not an infiltration unit or whatever you think. I'm just a human who ended up here by accident." "Neural patterns indicate genuine distress," noted the Kulari. "However, this could be an integrated element of the subject's cover identity." Eliana felt panic rising. The situation was spiraling out of control and she had no idea how to convince them that she wasn't some kind of sleeper agent. Worse, she was no longer entirely convinced of that herself. The phrase, "Ancestral Key," continued to echo in her mind, tantalizingly familiar, yet frustratingly opaque. "There must be a way to determine if I have suppressed memories without killing me," she argued desperately. "Surely the consortium has technologies that can safely examine neural patterns." Vex tool pulsed contemplatively. "There is the mnemonic resonance scanner. However, its use on potentially sentient species is restricted by Ethical Directive 42B. "I consent," Eliana said quickly. "I waive any protections under Directive 42B. I want to know the truth as much as you do." The Vexari and Kulari exchanged a series of rapid communications in their native formats, light pulses and mandible, clicks too fast for Eliana to interpret. Finally, Vex Tool announced, "Your request will be considered by the Emergency Response Committee. Until a determination is made, you will remain in isolation." Before Eliana could protest further, the transport field activated again, returning her to her quarters in the diplomatic section. The neural monitoring devices remained attached to her head, their presence a constant reminder that her every thought was now being scrutinized. "Ada," she called out when she was alone, "what is the mnemonic resonance scanner?" The mnemonic resonance scanner is a consortium technology developed by the combined efforts of Vexari and Kulari scientists, the AI explained. It is designed to access neural pathways that have been artificially suppressed or partitioned within a sentient mind. The procedure has a 87.4% success rate in retrieving intact memories. However, there is a 42.9% chance of permanent cognitive impairment in species without distributed neural networks. "So there's almost a 50% chance it could damage my brain permanently," Eliana translated grimly. "Your interpretation is essentially correct, though lacking in precise numeric specificity," Ada confirmed. "However, it should be noted that the alternative under current security protocols would be complete neutralization, which carries a 100% probability of permanent cognitive cessation." "Thanks for clarifying," Eliana muttered. She sat on the edge of her sleeping platform, trying to think clearly despite the throbbing headache developing where the neural monitors were attached. If the approaching ship was indeed from Earth, and if they knew who she was, then perhaps she wasn't here by accident after all. But if that were true, why couldn't she remember? As she sat contemplating her situation, a subtle change in the air currents caught her attention. One of the wall panels was vibrating at a frequency slightly different from the rest of the room. To anyone else, it would have been imperceptible, but Eliana's enhanced senses detected it immediately. Careful to move naturally, as if simply stretching, she made her way over to the wall and leaned against it casually, her fingertips lightly touching the vibrating panel. There was definitely something happening behind it, a mechanical process of some kind. Slowly, so as not to alert the monitoring systems, she explored the panel's edges with her fingertips. There, at the bottom corner, a minuscule gap had formed where the panel was beginning to separate from the wall. Something was cutting through from the other side. Eliana moved away from the wall and began a series of stretching exercises, positioning herself so that her body would block the surveillance sensor's view of the panel. As she moved, she focused, her hearing on the subtle sounds coming from within the wall, a faint rhythmic grinding that suggested precision cutting tools. Hours passed as Eliana maintained her charade of calisthenics and meditation, all while monitoring the progress. Behind the wall panel, the neural devices on her head made concentration difficult, but she forced herself to appear calm, controlling her breathing and heart rate to avoid triggering any alerts. Finally, when the station's lighting had dimmed to simulate night, the panel silently detached from the wall and was carefully pulled inward. Eliana sensed a small opening forming, not much larger than a ventilation duct, and then detected a new presence in the room. Something small had entered, moving with deliberate stealth across the floor toward her. "Specimen H1, whispered a tiny, familiar voice. "Please do not react visibly." Eliana recognized the voice as belonging to a Dravidi unit, one of the thousands of small, rodent-like bodies that collectively formed the Dravidi consciousness. This was unexpected. The Dravidi were generally rule followers who respected consortium protocols almost as rigidly as the Vexari. "We have voted," the tiny Dravidi continued, now directly beside her sleeping platform. "The collective has determined that your neutralization would be premature and potentially wasteful. We are implementing an alternative solution." "What kind of solution?" Eliana whispered, barely moving her lips. "The neural monitoring devices must be removed. They will detect our conversation within 37 seconds. When I give the signal, you must be prepared to move quickly." "Move where?" "The door is locked, and I'm assuming the ventilation duct you came through is too small for me." "Correct. However, we have prepared an alternative exit strategy." 23 seconds remaining. Eliana tensed, ready to move. "Why are you helping me?" "We have accessed the complete transmission from the approaching vessel. There was more that the Vexari did not share with you. Information that suggests the consortium itself may be compromised." 12 seconds. "Compromised how?" "The Ancestral Key is not a human concept, it is Vexari in origin." 6 seconds. "Prepare yourself." Before Eliana could ask anything more, the Dravidi emitted a high-pitched squeal that sent a jolt of pain through her head. The neural monitoring devices suddenly heated up, becoming unbearably hot against her skin. Instinctively, she clawed at them, tearing them away from her temples and scalp. Alarms immediately blared throughout her quarters, and the lighting switched to the harsh red of a security alert. The Dravidi scrambled up her arm and onto her shoulder. "The floor!" it squeaked urgently. "Center of the room! It's a maintenance access point!" Eliana dropped to her knees, hands searching the floor until she found what felt like a subtle seam in the material. As her fingers traced the outline of a hidden panel, the door to her quarters began to cycle open. "Hurry!" urged the Dravidi. "Press the 3 corners simultaneously." Eliana stretched her arms to reach opposite corners of the hidden panel while pressing a third with her knee. There was a soft click, and the floor section depressurized with a hiss, sliding away to reveal a dark shaft below. "Jump!" the Dravidi commanded. "The shaft leads to the maintenance levels. We will guide you from there." Without hesitation, Eliana lowered herself into the opening and let go, dropping into darkness just as security personnel burst into her quarters. She fell, for only a few seconds before hitting a sloped surface that sent her sliding through a twisting tube. The Dravidi clung to her shoulder, its tiny claws digging into the fabric of her uniform. After what felt like minutes of sliding through the pitch-black passage, Eliana finally came to an abrupt stop, tumbling onto a hard floor in a heap. The air here was different, cooler and heavy with the scent of machine oil and recycled coolant. She had indeed reached the maintenance levels of the station. "This way," the Dravidi urged, leaping from her shoulder. "More units are waiting to guide you. We must reach the emergency pods before the Vexari lock down all escape routes." "Wait." Eliana pushed herself to her feet, rubbing a sore elbow. "I can't just leave. What about the approaching ship? And what did you mean about the Ancestral Key being Vexari?" "No time to explain fully," the Dravidi replied, its voice now joined by several others as more units emerged from the shadows. "The Ancestral Key is a Vexari mythological concept, their version of genetic memory. The complete transmission from the Earth vessel suggested that humans have discovered something about Vexari origins that the Vexari themselves have been concealing." "That doesn't